I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome to a special episode of Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we're talking about the politics of higher education, specifically at Ohio State University. Former President Ted Carter shocked everyone this week when he stepped down over an inappropriate relationship. Less than a week later, OSU has a new president, and there's a $60,000 podcast involved. Columbus Dispatch reporter Sheridan Hendricks is our higher ed expert and here to help us wade through it all. Welcome to OPE.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Carter's resignation, which happened at an unexpected Board of Trustees meeting on March 7th. How did that all unfold?
Yeah, it's interesting because to say that it was unexpected, I think has some additional weight to it because last week, literally 1 week ago today, we were at Ohio State's Board of Trustees full public session, which kind of it's a quarterly meeting. It wraps up all of their committee meetings and it gives the board an opportunity to approve things for the university. That happened on Thursday, March 5th. And once that wrapped up, all the reporters in the room were like, great, we're just moving on with our lives. Literally the next day, around 10 a.m., we all get an email saying that the Board of Trustees is planning to meet again for another session, an executive session on Saturday. So then we're all asking each other, what could this possibly be? We literally just had the Board of Trustees meeting yesterday. The meeting that ended up happening on Saturday was a 3-hour executive session. So no one who was not on the Board of Trustees was allowed in there unless you were invited. And there were no public actions that came out of that meeting. So a lot of folks that were paying attention just kind of left the weekend feeling like, what could this have possibly been? There was some question if it had to do with Les Wexner and some of the naming rights issues that have come up there. There was some other question of whether this had to do with some of the lawsuits related to Dr. Richard Strauss. But at that point, it was just a lot of question marks. And then, as you said, we all found out on Monday what the details of that meeting ended up being about.
And so he offered to resign, but someone had tipped off the board about this relationship, right? That's how they found out?
Yeah. So the current timeline, as we understand it, is that sometime after the Thursday, March 5th Board of Trustees meeting, an unnamed tipster came forward to someone on the Board of Trustees and raised concerns about this inappropriate relationship. The board started to look into it. They confronted Ted Carter about it. Ted Carter disclosed the relationship and then offered to resign. His resignation letter is dated for March 7th on Saturday when the Board of Trustees meeting was, and then the board officially accepted his resignation and signed that letter on Sunday, March 8th.
What do we know about this relationship? I feel like when the university finally issued a statement on this past Monday, it raised a lot more questions than answers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in a lot of ways, that's still kind of where we're at. All we know at this point is that he was having an inappropriate relationship with a woman who was seeking public resources for her small business. As that has, started to unfold, we have learned that this woman is likely an individual named Chrysanthi Vlachos, who is a podcaster and has been involved in the energy industry for some time. She was working on this podcast called the Call Out Podcast, which Ted Carter had been a guest on multiple times. He described himself as a frequent flyer on this podcast. It seems at this point that she was, in this relationship with Ted Carter to try to get some sort of resources either from the university or perhaps leveraging some of his personal and professional relationships to try to benefit the work that she was doing. But it's still unclear exactly what that looked like and what that relationship looked like beyond what the university has said. For the record, we have asked Ohio State if they can tell us anything more about what they mean by inappropriate relationship and what they mean by public resources, and we haven't gotten a clear answer beyond that.
And this situation has also put Jobs Ohio on the defensive, and actually we learned a decent amount of information from Jobs Ohio, more so than we maybe did from the university. Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, Jobs Ohio is a private organization that helps the state with economic development. It's funded by state liquor profits, and they generally don't have to disclose much. But they did say this week that they paid $60,000 to sponsor 4 episodes of Vlachos' podcast, and that wasn't the only time she had talked with Jobs Ohio, tried to get support from them.
Yeah, and as you were saying, Jobs Ohio seems to have kind of confirmed a lot of what folks were speculating. Was this the podcast that, Ted Carter was potentially involved with? He's been on it a lot. Is this the woman, at the center of all of this? We've also since learned that Jobs Ohio is trying to get that money back for podcast episodes that were not produced yet, which I feel like is going to be a whole other situation that we may or may not
learn
more about.
It was $15,000 per episode, which is quite the podcast. I don't think our podcast is that expensive.
I need to find a podcast that will pay me $15,000 an episode.
Right. But only one of them was produced, and now all of her podcast episodes are down, right? They've been removed.
Yeah, I had one up on my laptop from several days ago and tried to watch part of it earlier today, and it's now been made private. But yeah, part of this, I guess to go back to some of this like public resource question, Vlachos did have a contract with WOSU when she registered her business in December of 2025. She listed WOSU Public Radio as the office or as at least the business address for her organization. WOSU is affiliated with Ohio State. We are still trying to figure out exactly how that relationship came together. We have reached out to Ohio State, filed a public records request to try to get this contract to understand more of how this came together. But yeah, I feel like I just keep repeating myself, but there's just still so many unanswered questions about how all of these threads really come together.
Yeah, for sure. Still a lot more to learn. One thing we do already have an answer to is who will be the next president of OSU. There was, of course, a lot of speculation about this after Carter stepped down, and the university just announced that Provost Ravi Bellamkonda will be the new permanent president. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so Ravi Bellamkonda, until yesterday, was Ohio State's provost and executive vice president. He came to Ohio State about 14 months ago by way of Emory University, where he was also the provost there for about 4 years. He has really only been at Ohio State since last January, which,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so not a lot of time as a Buckeye, but he says that he has learned so much about this university in the short time that he has been here. This is not his first time in Ohio. He was at Case Western Reserve University in the late 90s and early 2000s. He claims to be a big Browns fan and loves Cleveland very much. So he definitely still has some Ohio ties here and feels very fondly for the state, but his whole job before now being president was being the chief academic officer at Ohio State. So basically he oversaw anything related to academics at Ohio State. That would be overseeing the deans, the regional campuses, any academic initiatives, faculty and staff. Most recently, he's been involved in kind of heading and steering this AI fluency initiative that former President Ted Carter launched last June. The whole premise of that is that students who will be entering Ohio State will be bilingual, in quotes, in both their major and in artificial intelligence. So folks have a lot of feelings about that, and that's a whole other story that I'm getting into later. But he has been kind of guiding that whole process because he led a similar initiative at Emory.
Gotcha. This happened pretty fast. There was certainly no national search for a new president. Is this ruffling any feathers?
Yeah, I would say so. From the reaction that we have seen so far is, most folks are saying Robbie's a great guy. Folks don't have a problem with him as a person, as an academic, as a leader. Many folks who do take issue with how this came together are mostly concerned about shared governance and due process. There was a petition sent out by faculty members from Ohio State affiliated with the AAUP calling on the university and the Board of Trustees to do a national search, to appoint an interim and really take some time to do some soul searching here to figure out what the needs of the university are, and then go ahead and appoint a permanent president. I've been covering higher ed for the Dispatch for the last 5 years, and this is the third president that I have covered at Ohio State. There are some researchers that do work studying university presidents, and they would call Christina Johnson and Ted Carter, Ohio State's last two presidents, failed presidencies. That is not like a moral assessment of the work that they've done, but it is more of a look at they did not complete half of their first contract, so they've left within, 5 years. So it really raises some questions about what is going on here? What type of leadership are we getting at Ohio State? So that has really caused some issues with faculty members and staff who say, like, we are doing work day in and day out. We are relying on the leaders of this university and the trustees to be fiduciaries on our behalf. And we're just not feeling the confidence that we once felt when we were able to say, hey, our president has been here for 5-10 years and really doing the work. So it's definitely ruffled some feathers. Folks who say that Ravi is the person for this job definitely say that he will steady the ship. You know, he was brought in under Ted Carter. He helped create this academic plan, Education for Citizenship 2035, which is the university's 10-year strategic plan. He was actively involved in doing that, and he knows everyone who is currently employed, at least in the president's cabinet. So what he told reporters today was, I'm not trying to change anything. I'm not trying to come in and create my own strategic plans and start afresh. Like, I want to steady the ship, which I think for some who, you know, would like to see a national search, but have trust in Ravi as, you know, at least calming some nerves.
Yeah, this has certainly been a very unsteady ship, so I can see that being appealing to some folks.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? I mean, is the university, is the state investigating what happened with Carter?
Yeah, so the university has said that it is doing an internal investigation of this relationship between Ted and what exactly happened that created some conflicts of interest here. They are doing an internal investigation. We haven't heard of any investigations from state level officials yet, but depending on what comes out of the university's internal investigation, it's always possible that we might see other entities decide to investigate at some point. I think on the university side, a lot of folks are going to be paying close attention to this transition for Ravi. You know, he was the provost yesterday, and now he's taking on the entire Ohio State University system, which is main campus, the medical center, all of the regional campuses. You know, it has the largest alumni network in the country. So there's a lot more moving pieces for him as he's transitioning into this role. So I think folks are going to be interested to see what happens on both fronts.
Definitely. And clearly this saga is far from over. So be sure to keep an eye on the Columbus Dispatch for more reporting from Sheridan and our colleagues.
Thanks for having me.